fine.
Let him go, Charles. And if you're in the military, you can get in trouble for this. Yeah. Charles, let him go.
Let it go, Charles.
Okay, let me see your hands. I need to see some ID. Get on the ground.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
Nope. Shut your mouth.
Videotaping the police department's not a good idea.
Pointing their guns at Army Second Lieutenant Karan Nazario before Gutierrez pepper sprays him.
Okay, I understand.
So now I can raise my voice, right?
No, you can eat it.
In the Batman franchise, when Commissioner James Gordon says, "Everybody has to matter or nobody matters, otherwise people lose faith," you would assume that he must be talking about the lawless and corrupt Gotham City, right? Well, think again, because these gentlemen in uniforms are doing no favors to the much scrutinized reputation of the entire law enforcement. But thankfully, we don't need a caped vigilante to serve justice, as in these cases, the entitled cops get owned by higher authority. Our first incident took place on December 5th, 2020. Bodycam and cell phone video show how a Virginia officer pepper sprayed a Black and Latino Army lieutenant during a routine traffic stop.
What's going on?
How many occupants are in your vehicle?
It's only myself. Why are your weapons drawn? What's going on?
The door slowly and step out.
Get out! Get out the car! Get out!
Despite Lieutenant Nazario's repeated pleas, the two Virginia police officers, guns drawn, ordered him to get out without explaining the reason for the pullover. The officers then pepper sprayed Nazario to force him out of the car and proceed to kick and then handcuff him on the ground.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, you should be. Get out of the car now. Get out of the car.
Get your hands off me, please. Get your hands off me.
You know what?
Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me.
The incident report mentioned that the officers pulled Nazario over because his SUV had no tags displayed.
Why am I being treated like this? Why?
You're not cooperating.
Had dark-tinted glass and was suspiciously pulling over in the gas station. And all of this was easily refuted in court after seeing their dashcam footage. Officer Gutierrez even admitted that in hindsight it was not anything out of the ordinary. Imagine pulling over in a gas station and suddenly you have two guys with guns pointed in your window. Credit to Lieutenant Nazario that he remained calm throughout this tense situation. But even after checking that Nazario was in the clear and realizing that they had made a huge mistake, the officers then foolishly threatened to derail Nazario's military career if he took any further action.
Just chill, let this go, and no charges filed. We'll take the handcuffs off, we'll get you a bottle of water to drink on, and sit here until you feel comfortable driving.
But luckily, after a lawsuit, these two officers were held accountable, and one of the police officers was fired. There have been multiple debates and studies on the systemic issues that the law enforcement agencies face. The call for reform has been made in many sections of the society, but as this report states, wide-scale reform may not be an easy solution. Regardless of their training, police in the US face unique challenges compared to many other international counterparts, experts say. American streets are awash in guns and illicit drugs like fentanyl, and training alone won't change that. Meanwhile, police departments across the country continue to struggle with staffing shortages. Qualified recruits are in short supply, and many departments are not keeping pace with the number of police retiring or leaving the profession. According to a 2020 survey, 71% of police agencies spend less than 5% of their budgets on recruit training. And law enforcement remains a dangerous profession, with difficult hours and limited pay. As a result, Wexler says that improving policing requires a wide-ranging investment in the profession. There has to be a national commitment to want to fundamentally train and to compensate police at a level that makes them professionals, he said. Now, here are two police officers in a perfect real-life enactment of the movie Dumb and Dumber. The officers confronted a black male at a public place in Rochester, Minnesota. They racially profile and harass him and attempt to detain him, thinking that he was armed.
Wrong.
Hey,
no, if you're wrong,
you're
you're racial profile. Am I? Yeah, you're wrong. You're assuming I'm someone that I'm not. Are you Jake? No, I'm not Jake. You look like Jake. There you go. I look like Jake. Yeah, but you're Jake. No. Yes, you are. No, I'm officer. You're Jake. Okay, if get out of my face, man. You guys are harassing me. Yes, you guys are. Hey, you're fucking harassing me. Yes, you are. No. He's harassing me. Why are you harassing me? You're assuming I'm someone I'm not. Okay, if you're not, then... No.
What ensues is comedy gold, as upon checking the ID of the guy, the officers find out that they were trying to detain an FBI agent.
Oh, what does that say? What does that say? Oh!
Wrong guy.
Oh!
Wrong guy.
Oh my God! No, get the fuck off me, dude! Get off me, dude!
Bro, you fucked up.
Matter of fact, I need your cards. I need your supervisor over here. Call your supervisor.
These officers foolishly dug themselves into a hole and jumped in without any knowledge of how to get back up. Upon realizing that they had goofed up big time, they quickly uncuffed the gentleman, but couldn't even get the words out of their mouths to apologize. What's even funnier is that they were later joined in by their supervisor, who was clearly none the wiser and tried to stupidly defend their actions. The crowd that had gathered there was also clearly not amused at the behavior of these law enforcement officers. Robert F. Kennedy, former Attorney General and esteemed lawyer, once remarked, "Every society gets the kind of criminal it deserves. What is equally true is that every community gets the kind of law enforcement it insists on." In its essence, this quote suggests that the actions and values of a society often mirror or attract the actions and values of those who commit crimes within it, be it criminals or law enforcement officers. While it's easy to say that law enforcement should get better, maybe it's not as straightforward as it seems. Here's another example of police officers blatantly misusing their power and overstepping their boundaries. This incident took place on May 10, 2020, when Officer Cody Palmer and Officer Tiffany Kanoma from the Gotham City Police Department faced off against Sergeant Syra Austin. It all began when the officers responded to a call from the North Bay Hospital to check up on a child who had ingested nail polish remover. They arrived at the door of Sergeant Syra Austin. What they didn't realize was that they were at the wrong address. Now, normal protocol or even common sense would dictate that the officers would probably inquire politely about the distress call that they had received, but instead they went with this.
Raising his voice at me.
Okay, I understand.
So now I can raise my voice, right?
No, you can eat it.
What's his problem?
Okay.
Now, that's certainly a strong way to introduce yourself when you arrive at someone's doorstep at night to supposedly help them. Sergeant Syra immediately has his guard up and rightfully asks them what this is all about. He tells them the lady that they were talking about was his wife. Officer Kanoma responds that they were there to check on her well-being and to see if she was okay. Officer Palmer, on the other hand, went ahead and told Sergeant Syra that he was an investigator and was there to investigate him. Sergeant Syra told the officers that he had served in the Army for 9 years and inquired why he was under investigation. Now, at this point, the officers' inexperience in handling tense situations showed, and they foolishly made matters worse.
Can you come out here?
No, she can't come out there. Y'all need to tell me what's going on. This is my house.
We told you. We're here for a welfare check.
Not the right address.
A welfare check for what?
No, I got it. Y'all violating my rights right now.
No, we're not.
We're not, dude.
Officer Palmer was informed over the walkie-talkie that they were in fact at the wrong address. But instead of calmly admitting his mistake and apologizing to Sergeant Syra, the egotistical officer doubled down on his statements and refused to back down.
How?
Because
which civil right are we violating?
Why are you raising your
We're
voice?
not violating
Why is he
anything.
raising his voice?
Okay.
Why is he raising his
So
voice?
we are here on
you
a
threatening
welfare
me?
check.
I can go inside my house.
Things got heated pretty quickly from there on. Officer Kanoma, to her credit, at least tried to gain a modicum of control over the issue and tried to defuse the situation. But Officer Palmer kept arguing with Sergeant Syra and refused to budge, and even went on to vent his frustrations at Sergeant Syra.
That's my wife. So
Okay.
that's disrespectful starting off.
All right, sir. So.
That was disrespectful starting off, and,
Okay,
and then
I
he's raising his
understand.
voice at me.
Okay, I understand.
So now I can raise my
So,
voice, right?
So, no, you can eat it.
Clearly, in the case of Officer Palmer, wearing a uniform does not guarantee that you are a professional. In the ideal scenario, the officers would have courteously introduced themselves and clarified their purpose to visit to Sergeant Syra's residence. Upon realizing that they were at the wrong address, should have departed promptly after apologizing. But the lack of professionalism on the officer's part meant that not only did the situation get twisted, but someone who was really in need of assistance didn't get it on time. But if you thought that situation had finally been resolved and we could move on from the drama, wait till you see this.
Close the blinds.
Sir, do you have a 14-year-old son?
Close the blinds. Close the blinds. I'm not going in the house.
Are your
Close the
children
blinds.
okay, ma'am? Are your children okay?
Okay.
Do they look okay? okay, guy? He's asking if my children are okay. Who the f is that?
Okay.
Officer Carmona began knocking on the window and started inquiring about the kids' well-being while peering inside through the window. And this is when she finally realized that they were at the wrong address. She quickly tried to rectify her mistake, but Officer Palmer was still strung up on his high horse and refused to admit his folly.
So it may have been a miscommunication between North Bay and our dispatch. So we got a call that we needed. Okay, a 3-year-old was brought into the hospital because she ingested nail polish remover. Okay?
We don't know anything about.
Clearly, a little sensitivity training and basic courtesy wouldn't go amiss in these situations. According to a recent article in The Greater Good, American police are not well trained compared to counterparts in other developed democratic countries, and the training they get emphasizes violence at the expense of peaceful conflict resolution. It also reports on how the police are trained in the United States. The report mentions that the United States has no rational standard for police training. That's handled by 18,000 local agencies. On average, cops in the United States are trained for about 3 months before starting work, according to a study from the Institute of Criminal Justice Training Reform. Here's another example of a police officer who confronts an innocent bystander for supposedly looking for trouble by filming a public property.
Videotaping the police department's not a good idea. It is public property, but when you start recording our perimeter and our gates and what our activities are, it's a concern to us. We had officers that drove by and saw you pulling out of here, walking out of here, and said that you were recording them as they left.
I did.
Yeah, and that's an issue.
The officer in question then asks the civilian to identify himself or risk being detained. All this is just for filming a public property. This police officer is already riled up and would not hear no for an answer. After the back and forth goes on for a few more minutes with no end in sight, luckily for the civilian, the officer's superior steps in to take control. There's no
Okay, you don't want to identify yourself?
Well, I don't need to. He said he doesn't suspect me of a crime or anything, and I'm just
asking.
No, but no, sir, I don't.
Just asking. Okay, we're good. Let's go.
Okay. My name's John, by the way.
There's no substitute for common sense in any field of work. The sergeant quickly assesses the situation and diffuses it. He reins in his officer and stops him from doing something stupid and saves his department from potential embarrassment. Now, we've all seen or heard of police officers creating difficulties for ordinary citizens many times. But in this next case, we'll see that even other law enforcement officers are not safe from cops as well. On July 7, 2020, ATS officer James Burke was visiting a home in Columbus, Ohio, to seize a shotgun from an individual who was not allowed to have a firearm. But it was all about to turn incredibly sour for the officer who was simply doing his job.
Okay, let me see your hands. I need to see some ID. Get on the ground.
When Officer Burke showed up on the doorstep and identified himself, the resident called 911 and reported that a person was impersonating a law enforcement officer. Without bothering to check the agent's number, Officer Joseph Fahy and Officer Kevin Winchell were assigned to respond to the location. From the moment Officer Fahy arrived on the scene, he immediately started yelling at Agent Burke.
Okay, let me see your hands. I need to see some ID. Get on the ground.
He told Agent Burke to put his arms up and drop to the ground without even allowing him to explain or introduce himself. The situation took a wrong turn from the get-go due to the Officer Fahy's miscalculation. He asked Agent Burke to do 3 different things at the same time, and all of that while holding him at gunpoint.
I'm a federal agent.
917-110-3.
I'm a federal agent.
Agent Burke tried telling the officers that he was a federal agent doing his job. He initially refused to get on the ground, but eventually complied due to the insistence of both the officers, who still had him at gunpoint and refused to confirm his ID or listen to reason. But even then, the officers did not calm down and tried to handcuff Agent Burke, who tried his best to reason with the officers. Officer Fahy then tased the agent and manhandled him before proceeding to check his ID.
My ID's right here, left pocket. Left.
After confirming that he was a federal agent, which they should have done before they arrived at the scene, when they had Agent Burke's badge number, or even before they proceeded to use excessive force, the officers blamed the agent for being unprofessional and then dragged him into the police car while still handcuffed. They eventually had to release Agent Burke without any charges after an hour more of harassing him and hoped that their goof-up wouldn't come back to haunt them later. But unfortunately for them, Agent Burke wasn't going to let them go scot-free. He promptly went on to file charges against the Columbus Police Department and claimed that Officers Fahy and Officer Winchell had used excessive force against him and violated his constitutional rights. That's a +1 for karma once again. What's troubling and disturbing that we see time and time again is that it's not just the rookie officers who are in the wrong in these cases, but even experienced police officers have let their standards drop, so much so that it ultimately belittles whatever trust the public has in law enforcement agencies in upholding the law. According to another article, training is just one piece of a very complicated puzzle. Even years of training can't fix issues like racial and economic inequality, the inadequacy of mental health services, the ubiquity of guns in American society, or images of heroically violent police in movies, TV, and video games. In addition, many police reforms on the table go beyond training, including how officers are recruited and screened, revised guidelines for the use of force and traffic stops, more centralized data collection, and more serious consequences for violations of civil rights. In the next case of brutes in uniforms, this cop thought that he could do whatever he wanted, but he's in for a rude surprise when he gets knocked down a peg by his supervisor.
Apartment complex on what is the sir? Charles, let him go. You're.
Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around now. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around.
On May 1st, 2014, a Repo man and his wife were at an apartment complex to repossess a vehicle belonging to New Mexico State Police Department officer Charles Vernier. But the unsuspecting couple were definitely not prepared for what happened later when the husband found himself in the police officer's chokehold.
Charles, this is not going to look good on you. I need the key.
No,
I will let
get my stuff.
I need the key first, and then you can take anything out of their vehicle.
No, you're not getting my keys.
You need to let him go.
The cop was way out of line when he put his hand on the Repo man, who was just there to do his job. He physically assaulted him and put him in a dangerous chokehold. The wife started recording the whole ordeal immediately and pleaded and shouted to Charles to let her husband go, or she would have to press charges against him. But even then, the police officer was unrelenting and was adamant that he would not let go of the man because he didn't want to give up on his vehicle.
Get your stuff. Do you understand that?
He won't be able to breathe. Let him go.
He's breathing just fine.
Let him go, Charles. And if you're in the military, you can get in trouble for this. Yeah. Charles, let him go.
Let it go, Charles.
He kept the poor man in a chokehold for a further 9 minutes. The wife had then called upon local law enforcement agencies for help.
Sir, can I have a police officer here? He's actually assaulting my husband and he's not letting my husband go. Charles, let him go. He cannot breathe.
Get off.
Let him go.
I'm going to restrain him until the police get here.
Yes.
Because he assaulted me.
Finally, after a while, the police arrived. Charles demanded that the Repo should be arrested for assaulting him and still refused to release him in front of the police officer. The police officer quickly took stock of the situation.
Let him go. Let him go. Let him go. Now. Let him go.
He assaulted me.
Who's the truck driver?
I am.
You're the truck driver. Let him go. I'm going to give you one more second to let him go and get back before you get tased. Step around the vehicle now. Turn around!
Charles was eventually charged with aggravated battery and interference with a police officer. There's a quote by a filmmaker and playwright David Mamet. Policemen so cherish their status as keepers of the peace and protectors of the public that they have occasionally been known to beat to death those citizens or groups who question that status. The techniques and methods that the police use to confront civilians and act first rather than asking first have somehow turned the force more militaristic. Rather than saving lives, this police militarization has contributed further to violence. This next case involves protesters outside a government building protesting against police brutality. And going by our previous theme, no marks for guessing what happens next. Yep, more police brutality. Protesters, including Eric Brandt and Joshua, were out marching in neon shirts, raising slogans against police brutality when someone called the cops on them for trespassing.
The property. Yeah. You are now committing trespassing. Okay? That's all we're asking you to do is to leave the property.
I need your card.
I will give you my information when we're done.
No, you're
okay.
Now.
Officer Dickey then tried to force matters instead of calmly resolving them. He threatened arresting the protesters and followed them to the side of the road, all the while trying to detain them. He gave in to a rush of blood, which led to this happening.
Got it.
If there were any questions over the competency of police officers, well, they're about to get a whole lot stronger after this. The officer would soon be outrun in front of Chase by a protester wearing a neon vest while holding a flag about the police being incompetent. Oh, the irony. Shouldn't have skipped leg day.
He is under arrest.
Soon the hilarious foot race stops as the officers quickly run out of breath. Officer Dickey's supervisor then enters the scene and takes stock of the situation. From Officer Dickey, the officer fumbles around to somehow give out a coherent reason as to why he was chasing a protester out in broad daylight.
You see this sign? It says cops. You want to know why? Because cops like you keep...
And he refused to give me his ID, which he's required to do.
For what?
So I could issue him a citation for trespassing.
It's not trespassing.
They kicked him out of the property.
You!
The sergeant tells his officer to stand down and rightfully reprimands him twice before he switches off the audio from his body cam. He then tells the officer what he should already have known, that the protesters were completely in the right. This incident not only served a humble pie to the police department, but also cost them $175,000 in tax settlements. Maybe it's time for more soft skills training to avoid future embarrassment, or maybe more cardio. It may be difficult to win an argument against an intelligent person, but it's nearly impossible to win an argument with a dumb person. And it gets especially tough when that dumb person has authority and has the job to serve and protect the general public. This point is proved in the next case, where a seemingly routine encounter escalates into an unsettling situation. The problem begins when two police officers on patrol spot a vehicle in a public park. They decide to intervene and check up on it, fueled by their suspicion that something seemed off.
Make sure everything's all right. You got your ID on you by chance?
For what? Why I need my ID for?
Because you're parking in a public park after dark.
Public?
Yeah.
This is what you just said. Public.
Yep. After nightfall, it's you're no longer allowed to be in a public park.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's true?
Well,
is that law?
That's 100% law.
No, that's not by law. And no. We not doing.
Well, here's the thing. You gonna let me talk? You gonna talk?
The officer seemed to be on some kind of power trip and probably just wanted to showcase their authority over someone. What he didn't know was that one of the people he had just tagged was an Army veteran. The officer didn't expect the person to remain calm and certainly didn't expect him to clap back.
My job is to find suspicious activity.
Did we commit a crime? Did we commit a crime, sir?
My job is to find suspicious activity.
That's not a crime.
Once I begin conducting, basically, for lack of better terms, this is a traffic stop. At this point in time, I mean,
it's traffic stop. It's not a traffic stop. Listen, everything you saying right now is you being recorded, so you better be careful what you say.
The officer was flustered and began mumbling and could not explain his actions to the civilians that he had just walked up to. When he found out that one of the people in the car was an Army vet, he quickly began backtracking.
I'm a veteran. That's how I know. I'm a veteran who used to be.
So how does a traffic stop? Hold on, baby. How does a traffic stop and we ain't going away?
Listen. I'm telling you right now that you're in a suspicious location. Look, all I'm asking is, hey, provide some sort of ID. That way, if anything goes wrong, we can at least say who we talked to. You said this is your vehicle?
Yeah,
you were Miss Teresa?
I am.
On finally realizing he was not going to win this argument against the well-informed civilians, the officer decided to leave him alone. Miss Teresa's calm demeanor and knowledge of her rights helped her to stand up to the guy in uniform who was in the wrong. Earl Warren, the former governor of California, famously stated, "The police must obey the law while enforcing the law." A simple statement, yet its meaning seems to be lost on most of the power-drunk police officers even today. Quickly moving on to the next case, this incident became extremely bizarre from the get-go. A Marine officer who was just hanging out in a parking lot, patiently waiting for his friends, was pulled up by a cop.
Pulled into a gas station because my friends are here.
Okay, if you fail to identify yourself, I'm going to pull you out of this car and detain you for obstruction. Right now, you're interfering with my investigation.
No. Articulable suspicion that me, have committed a crime. Not anybody in the area, me. You aren't stopping them and questioning them. You stop me.
The officer threatened to pull the vet out of the car for obstruction. The civilian was aware of his rights and asked the officer for his reason for suspicion, and stated that he was a veteran who served in Iraq and would not be intimidated by a police officer in his own country. The Marine vet proceeded to ask the officer about his credentials, which the officer refused to give.
I am a free American, a veteran Marine who's done 4 deployments to Iraq. You're not going to come up to me and try to intimidate me. What's your name and your badge number?
I'm not going to give that to you.
You have to.
No.
Yes, you do.
No.
If the public asks for you to identify, you must identify.
Now, seemingly to break the impasse, another officer joined the scene and gave, frankly, an even preposterous reason. This seemed like a well-rehearsed trick from the old playbook of gaining psychological advantage over innocent, unassuming civilians. But the thoroughbred Marine was not going to fall for these tactics.
My name is Officer Pasadis with the Grand Junction Police Department, all right?
What crime do you suspect me of committing?
Possible attempted homicide.
You suspect me of committing possible attempted homicide.
Cooperative behavior right now does not help your cause.
Being cooperative or uncooperative, I'm not giving up my rights. When you give up your rights, you'll lose your rights eventually.
Now, if you've been thinking this ordeal must be over and they would leave him alone, you're wrong, because soon after a third officer joined the fray, hoping to put even more pressure on this individual. But credit to the Marine because he outmaneuvered the police officers and refused to budge throughout. He refused to give them his ID and even questioned them on why he had even come up to him and not the other dark sedan in the parking lot. He correctly called them out on their bullish behavior and did not give in to their authority.
My buddies that just left, they were also in a dark sedan, but you guys aren't questioning them. Why? They were in a dark sedan, dude, and you did not stop them and questioning them. You're doing it to me.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
Nope. Shut your mouth.
In the end, they couldn't touch his ID, and that's another perfect example of how to stand your ground against the cops who think that they are untouchable. Throughout these incidents, a clear pattern of misuse of authority by the police officer emerges, which could only be thwarted by tough individuals who knew their rights and didn't lose their composure in the face of adversity. But it begs the question of why time and time again the general public faces such harrowing ordeals. Why is common sense and some compassion in short supply in law enforcement? But again, it would be wrong to say that it is only the police that are in the wrong here, because for every bad apple, there are also upright police officers upholding the very fabric of justice without getting any flowers for their service. Sir Robert Peel, often regarded as the father of modern policing, once said, "The police are the public and the public are the police." The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties, which are incumbent on every citizen in the interests of community welfare and existence.